Hello YouTube and welcome back to another Star Wars Armada video. No, I am not dead. I'm not dead. I took a quick break after the holidays. Well, not so quick. It's been almost a month now, hasn't it? No, but I took a break, took care of some stuff, and now I'm back and I figured, let's talk about Armada again because I like talking about Armada and I like hearing from you in the comments what you guys think. And everyone right now is talking about the new Clone Wars ships, with good reason. Recusant, Venator, Pelta, they all look awesome. A lot of really interesting stuff going on there, and that's great. That's absolutely great. But that also means there aren't very many people talking about some older ships that have changed, and some changes that, well, maybe people might want to see, or things that I just want to talk about that don't necessarily have to do with the new Clone Wars stuff. There is some stuff I would like to talk about, with Clone Wars ships and commanders, and I'll probably make a video in due time talking about those just because, again, they're really interesting and I'm pretty excited for it. The difference is that everyone's already talking about those right now and no one's talking about this stuff, and I figured, hey, let's add some variety into the Star Wars Armada videos. And today we're going to be talking about Avenger. Yes, the Imperial Star Destroyer title card that has been nerfed into oblivion. So, why is Avenger dead? Why does Avenger deserve the dancing pallbearers? Well, quite simply, it's just now your last choice when choosing a title card for an Imperial Star Destroyer. And that's a pretty big fall from grace, considering it used to be the first choice, or one of the first choices for most people. And let's take a quick, brief history here of what Avenger used to be. So, the original Avenger card read, while attacking, the defender cannot spend any exhausted defense tokens. What this meant is, if you took an ISD-1, you put Avenger on it, and you got yourself in a position at close range where you're double arcing, say, an MC-80, and you use boarding troopers on that MC-80, that MC-80 cannot spend any defense tokens on either your front arc shot or your side arc shot, or whichever two arcs you're double arcing that MC-80 on. Now, or I should say then, when it was soft nerfed to be an exhaust card. You exhaust Avenger, so you can only use the Avenger effect on one, your front arc, attacks on an enemy ship. It was still really good, despite the soft nerf. It was originally great, and it was still pretty great. Not quite as great, but still really, really good. And Avenger kind of came into its own, especially with boarding troopers in there, and you would have combos like boarding troopers Avenger on an ISD-1, and theoretically, a boarding troopers Avenger Star Destroyer could one-shot an enemy Star Destroyer. And FFG, I think, wisely said, okay, no, that's not okay, we need to nerf Avenger, which they then did into the ground. And I've spent a few weeks now trying to think of how I would have nerfed Avenger to make it still usable. In this case, it really isn't, and still get rid of that super strong ability. And I don't think that there's a way to really make Avenger playable and still kind of keep in the spirit of what its effect was, or kind of was. So currently Avenger reads, while attacking you may exhaust this card. If you do, the defender cannot spend more than one exhausted defense token during this attack. Okay, couple things here. One, I don't think Avenger needs exhaust anymore, because even if it didn't have exhaust, I would never run this title card myself, even if I had the perfect setup for it. And the reason is quite simple. This is the Mon Carin effect. We know what this effect is. It's the Mon Carin effect, except Avenger now has a much, much weaker Mon Carin effect. Mon Carin is such a scary title card simply because it's going to either force an opponent to only redirect, only brace, or only evade. Probably only brace, if we're being realistic here. And now Avenger is saying, we have that effect, except now you don't need to have that concentrate fire token or command ready to go for it, but you do have to make sure that all those defense tokens are exhausted. And it is far, far more difficult to make sure that all enemies' ships' defense tokens are exhausted than to just have a concentrate fire token on hand. Not the least of the reason because Rebels have great token generation with their GR75s. So right off the bat, that's not looking good. The effect here isn't very strong. The only time that I feel that, other than setting it up with Overload Pulse, Sloan, or Boarding Troopers, where you would see a situation with an enemy ship that has a bunch of exhausted defense tokens, is at the end of a game. At the end of a game, enemy ship's got a bunch of exhausted defense tokens, and they're going to just burn all of them because it's probably round 5 or round 6, and they're just going to try and get away so that the ship doesn't get blown up, and because it's round 5 or round 6, they're probably not going to get into any more combat. They're not going to get shot at anymore, so they don't have any issues burning a bunch of defense tokens. In that situation, Avenger could be very good. In situations like with Sloan, Avenger could be good if you have Sloan with a bunch of squadrons you can activate. In situations with say an interdictor with Overload Pulse, sure, that could be good. We'll get into both of those examples going forward. But realistically here, I don't see Avenger seeing any play. And the first reason I want to get into is due to the other title cards you could run on an Imperial Star Destroyer. And here we see the Imperial Star Destroyer title cards that you'll be running aside from Avenger. I'm not going to read these off since I'm guessing most, if not all of you, already know what these do. If you don't know which one does, like Sovereign or Devastator, feel free to pause it now. But I'll just go through them real quick here. Chimera, yeah, fleet commands, but better. Absolutely, it's cheaper than Avenger, and it gives you way more options, especially early on. It's great. Devastator, definitely more niche and twice as expensive as Avenger, but you are getting extra blue dice in your front arc for things like leading shots or just extra dice. Extra dice is always good. Plus, with Tag having been buffed, discarding defense tokens isn't just an absolute death sentence anymore. Discarding defense tokens, you can absolutely recover from them fairly reliably thanks to Tag. Relentless, it's just an all-around really solid title card for an Imperial Star Destroyer. It was always really solid. Now I would say it's probably tied with Chimera as the best title card for an Imperial Star Destroyer. It's close. There's definitely an argument to be made for these other ones, but I definitely think Relentless and Chimera are probably the two title cards you're going to see most often. Maybe Relentless slightly more than Chimera, just because with Chimera you're going to have to spend more points in order to get it. Not just the 1 point for the title card, but also the points for the fleet commands. But in general, Relentless just really, really solid, and I definitely think we're going to see a lot more of it. Sovereign is slightly niche, not quite as niche as, say, Devastator, but being able to manipulate command tokens around all your other ships, especially now that you're going to be able to do that a lot more with Imperial fleets with a newly buffed Tarkin, yeah. Sovereign's a really solid title card. Again, it's cheaper than Avenger. 7th Fleet Star Destroyer is the last one. Now, 7th Fleet can be a little bit more tricky to use, simply due to the fact that, in general, you don't see a ton of Star Destroyers or Star Destroyer class vessels on the tabletop. And, well, really, there are only four types of Star Destroyers, I should say. There's the Imperial Star Destroyer, the Victory Star Destroyer, the Gladiator Star Destroyer, and the Onager Star Destroyer. Now, Onagers just straight up aren't going to run this because the special title cards for Onagers are, you'll just always want to run them. You'll want to run Raquel or Sunder or something like that. As for something like, say, a Gladiator, yes, absolutely Gladiator, because Gladiators can be kind of squishy, and reducing damage on those is great. And as for Victories, sure, I mean, you'll miss Warlord H9s if you're running just one Victory, but definitely 7th Fleet on some Victories. The reason I wanted to touch on 7th Fleet, though, is because I was talking with a friend of mine, and he mentioned, oh, what if you're running, say, a Sector Fleet battle, 800 points, and you're running 5 Star Destroyers? Wouldn't you want to run Avenger then on just one of them? And in that situation, I would say no. If you're running 5 Star Destroyers in a Sector Fleet battle, one, I'm fairly impressed that you spent enough money to get 5 Star Destroyers, since the only time you'd ever be using them is in a Sector Fleet battle. That aside, though, If you're running 5 Star Destroyers, they're all probably going to be fairly close together. Just run 7th Fleet on all of them. You got a bunch of Star Destroyers, 7th Fleet's going to be pretty good. So, in terms of just other title cards, Avenger is not that strong. There are just better options for title cards. That, in and of itself, I would say it's definitely looking at the trash heap if that was the only issue that current 1.5 Avenger had. But unfortunately, there are more. Here we can see what I would consider a more traditional BTA build. We have an Imperial 1-star destroyer because of the squadron value of 4 to maximize boarding troopers. We got boarding troopers, leading shots, Avenger, and I just threw spinal armaments here because more DACA, right? So this is what I would consider a more traditional, or the skeleton of a more traditional BTA build. As you can see, I don't have an officer, a commander, and I have 1 empty offensive retrofit slot. But now this is not that good. It's highly suboptimal because you're not only sacrificing 3 points, but you're also burning your weapons team slot and an offensive retrofit slot to get what is effectively one of your attacks into a Mon Carin attack. To get 1 Mon Carin attack, that's a lot to give up and a lot to invest just to get 1 Mon Carin attack. Now you're probably thinking, oh, 1 Mon Carin attack, yes, but Mon Carin is not as good because here it's an exhaustive defense token and they're probably going to have to discard it. And to that I say, Intel Officer on Mon Carin exists. And you can notice here we're spending 116 points to get this set up, and we are spending 133 points to get that set up. Yeah, now granted, again, this is not a very fair comparison because this is an Imperial list versus a Rebel list. By their very definition, it's apples and oranges. But I just view this as highly suboptimal, and I don't think that this is really going to work. You would be far better served by running something like a more general purpose ISD2 build with the Relentless title, or maybe you run a Simoon with the Devastator title. Something like that. And then here we have just another flavor of Avenger. Just a Kuat with Avenger, external racks, leading shots, and then an Interdictor with suppression refit, overload pulse. You know, again, this is nothing too spectacular, just another flavor. I've seen this run several times, and it can definitely work, and it's definitely very devastating. The only reason this didn't catch on as much as, say, BTA did is because, well, you have to make sure you activate the Interdictor suppression refit first, and when you're activating the Interdictor, your opponent can then immediately activate the ship that's about to get its clock cleaned by by Avenger, and maybe potentially move out of Avenger's front arc. Not as strong as BTA. And again, in this situation, the Interdictor is basically there to ensure that Avenger can go off. Now, obviously, you can run all your other shenanigans with your Interdictor, Graph Shift Reroute, targeting scramblers, Interdictor title, Captain Brunson. But again, this is a slightly weaker, slightly more maybe gimmicky. I hesitate to call it a gimmick because it can still absolutely work, and it's very, very strong when it does. But it's not as strong as BTA, and as I just mentioned, BTA right now is highly suboptimal, and right now this is really just an Interdictor suppression refit. On the other hand, though, with the Interdictor, you can maybe put like projection experts on there with the Kuat and turn it into a med pack. So this is a potential option here, but again, you're kind of hamstringing yourself by having to activate the Interdictor always before the Imperial Star Destroyer to get the Avenger effect off. And finally here we have a Sloan Combo, and this is going to be the last one I look at here just because this is kind of the last real instance where you would see someone running the Avenger title in a Sloan list. And the theory there is, well, it's quite simple. You'd come in with your Sloan squadrons and you'd spend all of the defending ship's defense tokens, and now they're all exhausted, and then you swing in with Avenger for a ton of damage. it was a great strategy, especially with like an Imperial 1 or Imperial 2 Star Destroyer, because they have a squadron value of 4, and in the Imperial 1's case, it's got 2 offensive retrofits. So, very, very, very strong. But now, you're not going to be able to swing in for nearly as much damage. You're effectively just getting a Mon Carin attack with Intel Officer. An Intel Officered Mon Carin. That's all this ends up being, and you have to commit most, if not all, of your squadrons in order to do it. This just seems even less efficient than the BTA example, the current BTA iteration I went over earlier. So I really don't see this catching on, especially when you can run Sloan with something like an Onager Star Destroyer with Sunder or Raycal and, say, XI-7s and a super heavy composite beam turbo lasers. Why not just run something like this over Avenger? You'll get pretty much the same effect, but you'll notice you're spending, well, you got Sloan on there, but even without Sloan, and say you can take off Minister Tua, you're spending less points to get Onager, your Onager all set up, and then you can add in, say, a Quasar, and you can do some tag team stuff with the Quasar. Again, Avenger is not terrible. It's not actively detrimental to you. There are just so many better options that, well, there's really no reason to bring it anymore. And again, I look forward to be proven wrong. If you can find a list where current iteration of Avenger works, please let me know. But as it stands right now, I definitely think this is one of, if not the worst title in Armada. And that is unfortunate because, again, I don't want to see certain title cards or upgrade cards never used. I think a game is healthiest and best when all upgrade cards, all options are open for use. And Armada is in a really good place because, in general, all of the ships can be used. There are a couple few exceptions, like the Interdictor Combat Refit, GR-75 Combat Refit, that sort of thing. But pretty much all the ships can be used. Certainly all ship models can be used for sure. And most upgrade cards can also be used. Yes, there's some exceptions, sensor teams, that sort of thing. But Armada, in terms of utilizing different upgrade cards, is in a great position. Avenger is one of those upgrade cards that's joined the ranks of upgrades that are just too bad to ever think of using because there are just so many better options out there. And it's a shame. I spent several weeks trying to think of ways, okay, well, how would I balance Avenger? How would I go through Avenger and say, okay, let's make this thing balanced for what it does? And I really wasn't able to find a way to do that without just making it like, think of like maybe like 20 points or something just obscene like that where it's really, really expensive to bring. And even then, it's still going to be played a lot because it's just such a powerful effect. So, yeah, if you can think of a way to balance Avenger and, maybe keep the spirit of its effect, but maybe not make it quite so powerful, let me know in the comments. Again, I just wanted to make a video here talking about Avenger because, well, it's dead, and I wanted to talk about exactly why. What does it mean to be dead, and what does it mean that Avenger is now dead? Well, long story short, we're going to be seeing a lot more things like Relentless, Sovereign, Devastator, and Chimera, and hey, maybe some combos with 7th Fleet Star Destroyer. That'd be great. I've seen some really cool fleets with 7th Fleet Star Destroyer in them, and I'd love to see more. But that about wraps this video up. Thank you all for watching. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe, the whole YouTube shield drill. And I will talk to you again soon.